Coaches, we're excited to be hosting the 2025 Hoosier Gym Coaching Clinic. The event will take place September 27th in Knightstown, Indiana. We have a great lineup of speakers and presenters, and the day will be packed full of great information and fun. See our website and social media for sign-up information. We hope to see you there. What's up, coaches? Welcome to the United Basketball Coaching and Leadership Podcast. My name is Jacob Durden, and I'm joined here today with Coach Jake Nannen of Elkhorn South High School in Nebraska. Coach, glad to have you on.
Happy to be here, man. Always ready to talk some hoops, and I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, no, we talked a couple months ago, talked some hoops, and circling back now, talk some more hoops here. Just as a refresher, kind of give a background of who you are and where you coach and anything in between.
Sure. So as Coach said, my name is Jake Nannen. I'm currently heading into year 3 as the head girls basketball coach at Elkhorn South High School here in Nebraska, which is a suburb of the Omaha metro area. And before I took the job here at Elkhorn South, I actually coached in a smaller town in Nebraska called Superior High School, where I was the head girls coach there for 3 years. And before that actually was on the boys side in the high school ranks for a couple years. So kind of got the best of both worlds there. I graduated from Morningside College up in Sioux City, Iowa, and played basketball up there under head coach Jim Sykes. And that was a great opportunity for me to kind of hone some of my offensive philosophy ideas from him. And yeah, it's been great kind of going through the different levels of boys and girls these last couple of years, kind of honing in our offensive and defensive philosophy and continuing to learn and grow, because I probably wasn't a very good coach 8-9 years ago. And I'll probably look back 8-9 years from now and think, wow, I really wasn't that good of a coach. So always learning, always developing, and trying to stay cutting edge with what we do here at Elkhorn South.
Yeah, I love it. Love to hear as a coach, always growing. You know, you ask your players to be growing. You should be doing the same thing. Always do an analysis, a little bit of an audit of who you are as a coach. And I love to hear it. So we were talking a little bit ago, not only do you coach high school, you're coaching some travel ball as well.
I do. I coach with the Omaha Supreme girls basketball organization here in Omaha.
Do you have an age group? What's the league like? Is it fairly regional? Is it coast to coast? You know, how do you operate the practice schedule, the game schedule? You know, give us a breakdown on your program.
Okay. So last year I stepped into this organization and I took a 14U team. So freshman to be last year. And then we kept that group together heading into this spring and summer with 15U. And we're hoping to keep that group together kind of throughout the high school ranks. And my team is built pretty heavily with some Elkhorn kids. Here in Elkhorn, we have 3 different public schools. So a majority of our team is built with our Elkhorn area kids. And our Omaha Supreme organization is on the smaller side of organizations here in Omaha. There's some bigger organizations called Omaha Sports Academy, Nebraska Attack, and they kind of have a hold on the Omaha area right now. And our organization takes pride in those multi-sport athletes that might not be able to travel to Indianapolis and South Carolina and Texas. So we hone in more on being flexible with our schedules, making sure that we are allowing these multi-sport athletes to play in the summer and spring if they'd like, where some of those bigger organizations might be a little more strict with attendance and participation. So Omaha Supreme currently is only on the girls side, and I believe we have one 17s team, one 16U, 3 15Us, and 2 14Us. So we practice twice a week, and we usually get to about 5 or 6 tournaments per spring and summer, and most are local. For instance, this weekend, our biggest trip, we're heading up to Minneapolis. So we have a lot of Omaha tournaments, Kansas City, Des Moines, and we try to get to as many live periods as we can.
Very nice. Glad to hear that it's growing. Sounds like you have a very good younger pool, and I like to hear keeping things local. You know, I don't believe you have to travel far and wide to find good competition. You know, I think there's good competition in every part of the country for everybody. So continuing on here, what are your thoughts on travel basketball? Kind of this AAU, the elite circuits, the atmosphere where things are. Kind of dive into some of your thoughts there.
Sure. On the girls' side, I'm a big fan. I think especially with girls, with really nationally the numbers of girl basketball participants dropping, I think on the girls' side, it is more than beneficial for some of these kids to expand their horizons without their high school teams and continue to develop throughout the summer. And for example, where I'm at here at Elkhorn South, I think the year before I got here, we had 2 girls playing AAU summer basketball. And now, partially thanks to Omaha Supreme, we've gotten that up to about 20 plus of kids playing in the summer. Atmosphere wise, on the girls' side, I think we're in a good place. I think the student athletes on the court are very respectful. I think the girls on the court are very coachable. All of the events that we have been to are well run. And obviously there's some areas of improvement that we can talk about here soon. But, to your point with some of the local tournaments, most of those kids that might be playing for next level opportunities will end up in the Midwest. And that's a generalized statement. Not every player that's getting recruited in our area will go to a Midwest school, but that's usually what ends up happening. So it is good to explore your Indianapolis tournaments, going down to Texas for a weekend to expand your competition horizon. But I would agree, staying more local allows you to connect with your probable college interest levels, unless, of course, you're a Power 5 recruit or Group of 4 recruit, where your horizons expand a little bit. So I might have gone on off a little bit of a tangent there, but I do think that the girls' game is in a good spot right now for AAU, mostly due to that participation and getting girls playing in the offseason.
I would agree. Next question to feed off that. I think the youngest you said you had was 14U.
Yes.
Yeah. So that would be current 8th graders going into 9th grade. I would consider that high school level, and then you have your 6th, 7th, 8th junior high level, and then your younger than 6th grade levels. What are your thoughts on where they should see themselves or place themselves in playing travel basketball, AAU, however you want to call it?
Sure. I think middle school basketball is fine to continue traveling locally. To your point, I don't think those 6th, 7th, and 8th graders need to travel extremely far out of their region. I think that would be more of a high school task. And when it comes to elementary, I'm not really in touch with elementary AAU or elementary teams. That's not in my scope right now, but I certainly would keep it to winter and summer, and I would certainly keep it to your local hometown area if possible. As in, if you're a 3rd through 5th grader here in Omaha, hopefully you have a really good winter league that you can participate in at some of our complexes. Whereas, there might be a team from a smaller town that might need to travel to a bigger area for a league game or a tournament. So the lower the level, the more local it needs to be, in my opinion. So that's how I would answer that question, even though my scope is more middle school, high school.
I would agree with that, though. High school, you're looking to go on to play to college, more or less. And your middle school, you're preparing for that high school level. So you can add a little bit. You can still travel, but maybe not as much. But I really think that the youth level, younger than 6th grade, local leagues, playing 3-on-3 or traveling maybe up to an hour to play is most beneficial there. I've seen a few times some teams come from the East Coast out to the Midwest here to play in an elite AAU tournament, and the kids are 3rd, 4th grade. And it's like, well, that seems like a lot of money, a lot of time, and maybe not as much benefit as you would want.
Right. There is no benefit. There is no benefit. Because you would want to go out of state, out of region to arguably get recruited.
Mm-hmm.
That would arguably be maybe with some new, fresh competition to play against, but 3rd and 4th grade, it does not matter. And you're right. The more local, the lower the cost.
Yes. Yeah. And I think as a coach, I'm always looking out for my parents, the dollars that they have to spend, get the most bang for their buck. So you had alluded to it earlier. how can we improve the game? And I mean travel basketball. There's a lot of debates going on right now of, like we just said, the travel that's involved. Parents who want to go and attend these tournaments are paying for parking passes, paying for $100 entry fees to watch the game. They're paying to be in the program and all the costs associated with that. And there's issues, debates on the officiating, the learning and the benefits from the league, and playing. I coach travel basketball, and I was just at a tournament this past weekend where there were some disagreements between the parents and the officials, and maybe the coaches and the officials, where they called the game, and then a fight between the parents and the officials and the coaches ensued, and people had to be pulled off people, and it was a very disheartening situation. So with all that, what are some steps that you see that we could take to improve the game?
Sure. So I think first thing that comes to my mind in regards to more of the basketball aspect of AAU travel ball would be having coaches that are truly invested in having structured practice plans, where when you're together, you're making the most of your 90 minutes, where, you're viewing it as a high school practice and an opportunity to get better. And I don't think that all programs and all coaches necessarily do that. I think sometimes those AAU practices can be a waste of time. And that's something that we try to avoid. If we're here, we have 90 minutes to lock in and do our thing. And I understand that comes with experience and age. And, AAU is a great time for younger coaches to get in and practice and build their resume if they're intrigued in joining a high school staff in the future. And I think maybe including a skill session or two within your AAU program where you can really focus on 45 minutes of skill work, individual improvement to go along with your structured practices. I think that's the first step on a more basketball scope of things to helping our AAU game get better and better and better. With that being said, you touched on it, kind of the scope of AAU. I think one thing that comes to my mind would be more security in regards to well-trained security companies, well-trained event organizers that can keep the area safe. I know we see that more on the boys' side where there's a lot of pushing and shoving. There's fans getting into it, like you mentioned, with refs. And I think upping security at bigger events could be beneficial to keeping the environment safe. And you hit the nail on the head with the last point that I had written down on my notes of lower admission prices. I think we're getting to the point now where entry fees are pretty high. And then, like you mentioned, stacking on parking, stacking on weekend passes. I think we've got to find a way to condense those a little bit and make sure we're not losing sight of the real goal of AAU, which would not be to make tons of money I understand money needs to be made, but finding a way to decrease those things. So I think in my mind, those 3 to 4 just big ideas are all ways that we can help the on-court product of AAU continue to get better and better and better. And it really does start with the individual programs and the individual coaches within those programs that set the tone.
I agree. Just a thought that I had here as you're going to play, you touched on your practices. You have 90 minutes to practice and you have player development, and then you get into the games. I see a lot of times teams that will have, say, 12 players and they're just playing 5 in, 5 out, 5 in, 5 out, full court pressing, even when they're up by 20, 30 points. Do you have that in your league as well? If so, what are some things that you're doing to counteract that as you're trying to build a little more structure into the game?
Sure. So really at the tournaments that we go to, we do have that sportsmanship aspect in the back of our minds. We've been lucky enough to actually have a few blowout wins where we kind of have to pull off our 1-2-2 press about halfway through the second half and work more on our man. And I think that's a good message to send to our team and our program of, hey, we're here to win, we're here to dominate, but we're going to do it the right way so other teams can still enjoy their experience and continue to get better. And strategically, with AAU, I think it's important to provide your general spacing template offensively and provide players with a few options, but you can't get too set heavy. Because, if you're lucky enough to have colleges at your games, the older and older that you get, they do want to see your style of play within a free-flowing setting. They know that they can get a lot of set plays down and you can execute those properly, but having a free-flowing system strategically does allow those players to utilize their skill set, show their stuff, and show coaches their IQ and knowledge of how to play the game, which leads me to my next point of defensive strategy. I think with AAU travel ball, you have to have a base man defense. I think it does everyone a disservice if you're sitting in a zone the entirety of the game. With that being said, we do run a half-court 1-2-2 trap as kind of our curve ball to get out and run, because transition's a big part of what we do. But we're not sitting in that 1-2-2 all game. Because again, college coaches or really your player development, you're not doing yourself any favors by sitting in a true zone majority of the game.
Yeah. What I was trying to get at is we've had teams who will play really, really tough up in the front court. And if you break that, then they don't care. Just you can go down, score a layup, and then they're going to get back into their half court set. And me as a coach, it's kind of frustrating because my players really want to work on their half court offense, but there's no half court defense to go up against sometimes because of another team's strategy.
Right.
And we could be down 15-20 to nothing, and just like, well, they're still pressing, and we haven't gotten into a place where they've pulled it back and are in a half court defense. So I can't make any changes because we're technically breaking the press. We just don't have a set defense to go against.
Yeah. And that's kind of the tricky part, right? Because on one hand, I get it. Like as a competitor, if we're doing something that works, we're going to keep doing it as long as possible. But, to your point of, well, they're just going to pressure hard on the front court and then pretty much jog back on D. I think that goes back to our core point of it's starting with the program itself and the individual coaches that are setting the tone, because someone's allowing that to happen. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where AAU kind of slowly trickles off, is when those things happen. And I would wholeheartedly disagree with that philosophy as well.
So do you see the AAU travel basketball as the hand that guides the high school team, or should it be the other way around where the travel basketball complements what you were teaching and learning at the high school level?
I think here in Nebraska, it's the latter. I think high school basketball still takes the cake here in Nebraska as top priority. And AAU is kind of a side element of that to bring back to your high school programs to continue to develop. And that might not be the case in other states, but luckily here in Nebraska, at least on the girls' side, that high school basketball still is top priority from my perspective.
I would agree here as well. And girls basketball has been around now for a long time, but it seems with the surgence of college basketball and the WNBA, things are really starting to pick up in terms of participation. So I'm glad that you're seeing it that way. That kind of feeds into the next topic here of practices. So my initial question for you, and I'm sure everybody's on the same timeline, more or less, but when does your season officially start for high school ball?
Our first day of official practice, aka the first day of tryouts, is November 17th. And we typically start our fall workouts after Labor Day. So that gives us roughly 8 weeks or so, maybe more, maybe less, to kind of crescendo our fall athletes up into the beginning of tryouts on the 17th.
And generally, I'm sure you have numerous multi-sport athletes, which can't probably make every fall workout, if any. So in general, how many athletes do you have that come to fall workouts?
Fall workouts, it'd be tough to say right now off the top of my head. I'd say probably about half will be at fall workouts. So we'll end up having about 35 to 40 trying out this winter. So I'd say on average, we'll get anywhere from 15 to 20 maybe on a good night for fall workouts.
Yeah. So then at those fall workouts, how many are you running a week and what are you trying to accomplish at those?
Sure. So fall workouts, we try to get on the court twice a week and we try to lift twice a week. And we usually go about 1 hour and it's really focused on skill development. So within those 8 weeks, hopefully we see some increased skill. And like I said, conditioning and physically, we're kind of crescendoing up to that first day of tryouts. And, we're obviously trying to tailor some of that skill development to our offensive system, but we want to refine leading up into the season.
For sure. So you said you'll have about 40 players try out this fall. And what do you cut that down to for your program?
Sure. It goes year by year. By the end of tryouts, we want to have 3 very competitive teams. So we'll have a varsity team, a JV team, and a reserve team. Our program goal is to hopefully one day get a 4th team, aka the freshman only team. But that kind of becomes more of our reserve level. So, it would vary anywhere from 30 to 35. In our class, we can't keep everyone. It's just too competitive. So in a perfect world, we get that down to about 32, 35-ish heading into the season for 3 teams.
If you have 40 tryout, you'll have to cut about 8 players.
Most likely. And again, a lot can change from now till the winter. But if we have 40 players that can make a team, we'd put 40 players on a team. So it's impossible to tell right now. But yeah, most likely we'll have about 35-ish of 3 hopefully competitive teams.
Very nice. And we're talking girls basketball. As a coach of girls basketball, I just love hearing that you have that much participation. So your first week, you're cutting through tryouts here. What are some things that you're looking for in tryouts?
Sure. So within tryouts, we kind of have a playing time matrix where we're obviously evaluating the basics: ball handling, footwork, shooting, finishing, driving reads, you name it. Kind of all of those categories that are important to our skill development. And we have individual tables and charts for all players. Another thing we keep in mind is having a high level characteristic. So maybe there's a player that's below average defensively, below average with their ball handling, below average with their finishing, but they can shoot the heck out of the 3 ball. That might be that high level characteristic that allows them to make a team. And as the days progress, we keep a running record of all of these different skill sets. And keep in mind, we also see these kids all summer. We see a lot of them all fall. We have last year to go off of. So really by the time tryouts start, we have a pretty good idea of what the teams could look like. And we're really trying, with the numbers that we have, we're really trying to focus on those 10 to 15 cusp players that might be projected in between different teams right now. And that really allows us to narrow in our focus as opposed to, that 3-year varsity starter that pretty much has their spot locked. So with the numbers that we have, we do have to kind of narrow our focus and snapshot on some of those tweeners and those incoming freshmen.
Gotcha. So you've got your team locked in here and you're scheduling your practices. How do you build out a practice? How do you split 3 levels of competition? Does everybody practice together? Is there a mix somewhere in between?
Good question. So once we have our 3 teams set, we're always practicing varsity and JV together. And we'll typically go after school. And that means our reserve team, which would be a combination of freshmen and sophomores, they're typically going in the evening afterwards. So we've never tried to combine them together. I think the skill set would be a little too far apart to be productive for either or category. So we've always kept those separate, and it's worked well for us, splitting varsity JV and reserve.
Do you keep that in one gym, Or if you have multiple gyms, if you're splitting those things up, how do you split those practices?
Sure. So with our boys program, we always alternate gyms. We have a main gym that has 6 baskets, much more expanded. And then our aux gym, which has 6 baskets, but it's very condensed and you don't get a lot of full court there. So we do swap every day. So maybe on a Monday, we've got our varsity and JV in the main gym. On Tuesday, we'd have to go in the aux gym. So after school, our varsity and JV's pretty much locked for that 2 hours or whatever the case may be. And then boys and girls, both programs, typically have their younger levels coming into those same gyms afterwards in the evening. So maybe our varsity JV goes from 3:45 to 5:45. Our reserve team's coming in right after and going 6 to 8. So we think those evening practices are a little bit more beneficial than those early morning practices because we view it as what time are we going to be playing games? And most of the time, those kids are playing games in the evening.
For sure. So you're looking at 25 to 30 players at a time. How many assistants do you have? And then how do you delegate duties to your assistants?
Sure. So right now we have 3 full-time coaches along with myself. So we have a head JV coach, a head reserve coach, and a program assistant that helps us out at all levels. And we're lucky enough where our head reserve coach also comes to our JV and varsity practices. So in the gym for our varsity and JV practices, we've got 4 coaches at a time, typically spread out against 20-ish players, which gives us a pretty good ratio of about 5 to 1, if I'm calculating correctly. And delegating is certainly not my strong suit. I think being at a smaller school where I kind of had to do everything on my own, I think that's an area I need to improve upon as a coach. But typically, we like to have kind of a defensive coordinator that will take the lead for some of our defensive games and drills and ideas. And that's kind of their time because it can't always be Coach Nannen bringing the juice and bringing the energy because it'll eventually turn into white noise. So I think having kind of a defensive coordinator that can coordinate those things within your system is very beneficial. I think having a coach that can track some things that you're emphasizing for the day can be very beneficial. Maybe you want to track offensive rebounds a certain group gets through that day. That can be important to track. Maybe you really want to track amount of paint touches a certain player or team is getting throughout a practice. That can be beneficial. And I think just giving them times and segments where they can dig in there and coach and feel comfortable to make their voice heard is important. But again, like I mentioned, it's certainly an area of growth for myself. I don't delegate very well. I think there's a phrase that, sticks with me jokingly where it's like, if you want something done well, you've got to do it yourself. So that's, I don't mean that seriously, but it is a quote that I've heard. And that's something that I need to continue developing.
So as we're talking about assistants, and you had brought this up a little bit ago, but you said you have some matrices and different charts that you're looking at during your tryouts. Do you use those same matrices and charts throughout the season to continually track players and show them some progress or potentially regress?
We do. So our playing time matrix is actually geared more towards once teams are made and we have roles assigned. This allows us to kind of have our receipts, so to speak, with parents and players when they ask about role updates, because that's something we try to be ahead of the curve on once teams are made. After about a week of practice, we try to be as clear and concise as possible with what players' roles will be. Girls, here's how many players we're going to be playing at the varsity level. Here is your role. Here's your minute expectations, with the expectation of knowing that that could change as the season goes. So playing time matrix wise, this allows us to kind of tell players and parents and administration why a player might be getting certain playing time at the varsity level, as well as the JV and reserve. But at the JV and reserve levels, we believe in opportunity. So everyone's playing, everyone's getting consistent minutes. But varsity level, you're more competing to win. So a playing time matrix kind of helps players and parents understand our decision making of why or why not something might be happening for their player. So there's 5 sections on here right now, and one of them is our standards. Is this player consistently above the line, on the line, or below the line with the standards that we have as a program? Obviously, if there's a player that's below the line with what we do, and talent-wise, they're even with another player who's consistently going above and beyond our standard, obviously, we're going to be more inclined to play that player that lives above the line with what we do. And then we have our general skills. We have our IQ and decision making, which is a little bit different than our skills. IQ and decisions is more tactical with our schemes, as skills is more technical. You can be a really skilled player, but lack the ability to play within our system, with our cutting rules, with some of our concepts. We also have an intangibles category, which kind of fits with our standards, but that intangibles could just be what coaches view as a player that has a high motor, that junkyard dog mentality. Maybe it's their high level characteristics that don't have anything to do with their skills. And then time and score and situations. Obviously, if we're playing a bigger forward heavy team, we might need to make our own lineup a little bit bigger and forward heavy. Whereas if we really want to push the tempo, there might be situations where we need to go guard heavy. So those are kind of the 5 umbrella ideas that go into our playing time matrix: our standards, your skills, your IQ and decision making, the intangibles you bring to our team and program, and situations that you might or might not be a part of.
I like that. Something that I didn't know early in my coaching career, but I think is slowly helping. As a coach, we can say on a opinion-based statement that this is my starting 5 or this is my rotation, but it's just our opinion. And everybody's generally like, oh yes, that's correct because that is working. But the more you put qualitative and quantitative stats to it, the more you can back up and have that safety net when problems or questions arise. So you have some qualitative and some quantitative things on your matrix. Are those things you're evaluating every practice, once a week? It sounds like you might make game-to-game changes or evaluations as well. So how often are you evaluating your matrix?
I would say bi-weekly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once you get into the swing of the season, you pretty much have your rotation set. That's about the point of the year where some of those JV players that might be making a jump and might be earning their varsity uniform or maybe some varsity minutes would really benefit from jumping on that playing time matrix. I think it helps, again, those role players understanding why they might not be starting and or why they might not be playing 20 plus minutes a game. And I think more than the playing time matrix itself, I think it becomes more just quick check-ins with your players and role clarity. Playing time matrix wise, that's more for us as coaches, but that helps guide our conversations with statistics that we use frequently for players that naturally will want to play more minutes. And we do just try to be as honest and stat driven as possible, with the understanding that there are some of those coaching ideas and coaching decisions and intangibles that go into that as well. But stats don't lie either. If you're shooting 24% effective field goal percentage with a 16.3 turnover percentage, it's obvious why you're not getting more minutes. But sometimes kids don't know that. So just those consistent check-ins. You learn that you can never communicate enough, especially as a head coach. You always have to communicate and you always have to clarify. And that's something that I'm continually improving upon myself.
I am too. I think sometimes players and parents are like, another message on the message board from this guy, another email from this guy. It's just communicating that, making sure, heaven forbid, something get lost, being sent out, just making sure everybody's up to date on any changes. Moving on here, you had said a little bit ago, generally speaking, your practices are about 2 hours. So you might be locked in anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours. Getting everything that we want to go through as coaches can be very cumbersome. So how do you plan your practices? Pre-practices, do you have vitamin drills? Do you plan it to get right into your offensive and defensive schemes, your scouts, your player development? How do you plan your practices?
Sure. So generally speaking, we want kids to be in the gym about 10, 15 minutes before practice. So let's say we're going 3:45 p.m. to 5:45 p.m. Hopefully kids are in the gym by 3:30, fully dressed and ready. And pre-practice wise, we like to group into some daily vitamin work, which would just be on-air fundamentals. So maybe we have a group that needs to work on their ball handling and footwork. They might go with Coach A to a basket, and they might get some pre-practice work in. Maybe group 2 really needs to work on their finishing at the rim. Group 2 might head to another side basket with Coach B, and so on. There might be a post breakdown group. There might be a shooting group, you name it. And hopefully we're being purposeful in getting our minds and bodies ready, stealing reps for the buzzer to go off. Once that buzzer goes off, we're jogging over, racking the basketballs, finding a baseline, and we're getting right into our whole group dynamic warm-up. That usually takes about 5 minutes. At the end of their warm-up, we're clapping it up, bringing it up to half court, and that's when we'll delve into our pre-practice meeting. That usually takes about 2-3 minutes. We touch base on an offensive emphasis, defensive emphasis, and a thought for the day. That kind of just gets our mind right and ready to roll. Once we break down that pre-practice meeting, we're probably getting into some type of individual or team skill development session for about 15 minutes. That might be some continued on-air technique work. That might be some one-on-one advantage finishing. That might be some team movement shooting, where we're just working on our habits of movement, getting game-like shots in. That might be some full court transition hit-aheads, you name it. The opportunities are endless there. We're taking those first 10, 15 minutes to kind of focus on us. Then, as we kind of use those on-air drills as some of those primers or our teaching drills, then we're starting to flow into some training games, which for us would be a lot of small-sided games. Specifically within our system, those small advantage to big advantage games, where we're either giving the offense a small advantage to turn into a big advantage and work on some of our concepts, or we're even giving the offense a big advantage, where maybe we have a 4-on-3 in a half court setting, 4-on-2 in a half court setting, to really train that 0.5 decision making. And throughout all of these, I should also mention that, as we're kind of progressing through our sections, we'll typically mix in a shooting drill in between or some free throws in between. And those are typically whole group shooting drills. We do a lot of 3-man, 2-ball drills. We try to mix in some conceptual shooting with some 2-outs, some down-up overs, things like that. And once we kind of do some of those smaller sided games, that's when we frequently flow into some either 5-on-0 set work or 5-on-0 transition work. We still do some 5-on-0. I know in the basketball world, that's like a forbidden sin nowadays, but I do think there's a time and place, although we're majority playing. And once again, we kind of use that as a primer or a teaching drill. And then we're trying to flow into our transition sequence, where we're maybe doing some 2-on-1 cardinal. We're doing some 5-on-3 advantage transition games. 5-on-5 might be the case as well. What we would just classify as our transition sequence, about 20 minutes there of running and gunning. That's a big part of what we do. And typically, we'll end with some, maybe even mix it in beforehand, just some 5-on-5, half full, some 3-play scrimmage, some script to live, some read to live, you name it. And, generally speaking, trying to fit in those end of game situations, trying to fit in more shooting. But we've gotten to the point now where we're not doing a ton of consistent defensive breakdown drills anymore. We get more bang for our buck, especially mid-season, doing more two-way teaching with some of our small-sided games and transition. We're always playing defense. And one, I guess, sidebar there would be that individual and team skill development section could also be defense when we could do some breakdown drills there. And those small-sided games could also be defensive geared, like some 3-on-3 Suns closeouts. So in a long-winded answer, that's kind of how we would structure our practice. We want to be 80% competing, 20% on air, because there is a time and place for technique work.
For sure. You want to practice those things to get that cognitive mindset before going in and actually trying to execute.
Exactly.
Defense or offense, what have you. And you touched on situational work. I think a lot of coaches are really starting to incorporate situations at the end of their practice, or maybe in that there's a lull between a really competitive part of practice and the next competitive part of practice. So you can squeeze situation work in there where it's more cognitive and playing the situation. One thing, though, I had a question on. A few years back in March Madness, the bench celebrations were all the rage. So do you practice your bench celebrations?
We do. We actually coined that term as Benergy. I believe we stole that from Molly Miller, who at the time was at, I think, Drury University in Missouri. And now she's just skyrocketed up the coaching ladder. She took Grand Canyon U to, I think, the NCAA tournament in year 2. And she just took the Arizona State job. And she's kind of that pressure man energy coach. So we coined the term Benergy from her, which just means bench energy into one word. And we do practice those. And we just kind of have that as the culture section for like a drill on our practice plan, where we will practice how we sub in and out of the game, making sure we're sprinting off, making sure our bench is standing up and giving a double high five. We teach the expectations for when a coach calls a player over during a dead ball on how we should move over there, how we should listen. We don't give specific celebrations, coach. We kind of let the kids do that on their own, but we'll say like, okay, girls, we want to be more excited and energized when something good happens on the defensive end than we do for a made 3-pointer. So we'll practice like those aggressive clapping. We do chants, and obviously we have 3-point celebrations and some of those things as well. But yes, we try to practice some of those micro details that sometimes go unnoticed, because I think it helps make a more disciplined team. I think you're preparing as opposed to reacting. And like, why would we get mad at a player for walking off the court when we haven't taught them that they should be running and jogging everywhere? So that's an important element. That it's a unique question too, because I didn't do that a few years ago until actually another coach at Lincoln Southeast High School, where I was coaching on the boys' side, did that. And I'm like, what is going on over here? Like, what are they practicing? And he told me afterwards, and we kind of stole it from there. So I think a missing element we've had I forget what we called it, but 2 years ago, we had like a Benergy leader on the bench who was kind of in charge of all of those things. We didn't do it last year, but I kind of want to get that going again, just kind of having like a Benergy captain. But those are very important, and I would recommend teaching them as well.
I would too. It was something that I just picked up last year at our Coaches Association coaching clinic. The coach who was speaking was a high school coach on the boys' side, smaller school, and he came to the realization some years ago that some games are going to be a haul. You're going to have to travel a long ways, and you might not have the fans there, but the people on your bench are going to be there. And if they don't know how to cheer, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they've never practiced it. They don't feel comfortable doing it. It's the same thing as asking a player to run a pick and roll and they have never practiced the pick and roll.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to the standard that you set, right? If you want to have a team full of energy giving behavior players, I mean, reward that and teach them how to do so. I love your point on like that skill piece. It would just be like a student in the classroom not knowing how to do double by double multiplication. Like you said, might not be great at reads off of a ball screen, but we sometimes view behavior and skill as separate, when in reality, I think we should teach them both because it is a skill. And last thing I'd say on that is it's really easy to like teach those things at the beginning of the year, but like holding them to the fire and holding the bench to the standard that you want throughout a season is important. And we've had a couple film sessions where we'll literally just clip our bench and like put a huddle circle around them after, maybe a player gets a good defensive rebound, or maybe we have a great and one. And we will call out girls that are like sitting down, like, because it's clear as day. Like, why aren't you standing here? Why aren't you energized for your teammate? And I think that's a good way to kind of hold them to the fire of, oh, it's the middle of the season and coach is watching our energy. Like, we got to clean this up a little bit. And that can be the hard part sometimes, but goes a long ways, I think.
I think so. On that same topic, you have up to 2 hours of practice time, and then you have road trips and you have games. And during the season, you're probably seeing these players more than they're seeing their own family, more than you're seeing your own family. You're becoming more or less a family as a team. How do you incorporate that team bonding, that connectivity during practice, or maybe even outside of practice?
Sure. So in regards to outside of practice, we do have team dinners where whether it's varsity, JV, or reserve, a family will host at their homes and we'll go over there and eat dinner together. That's a pretty common team bonder, and that one has withstood the test of time. So team dinners at individual houses is a great way to do so periodically throughout the season. We do try to plan one team outing. And by team outing, I mean program outing, varsity, JV, reserve per season. And I think that's a good way to kind of take a day off from hoops, go do something together. And this year for us, that was the Creighton versus UConn women's basketball game in Omaha that we all went to as a program. And in regards to in season, I think that kind of comes back to your leadership council, where our players will vote for different age level players in our program, and they'll be a part of our leadership council. And we try to meet bi-weekly just to kind of get the pulse of the program, pulse of the teams, maybe mix in a Greg Burge leadership lesson or two. And we kind of use that. I wouldn't necessarily say as like a team builder, but I think in season, it kind of gives players a little bit more ownership of our program and kind of allows us to meet halfway between what happens in practices and what happens in the locker room and the weekends off the court. They kind of bridge that gap, and I think allows them to hopefully become more and more player-led as the season goes on.
Team bonding is, I think, a must anymore. So, next question. What are some of your favorite drills, things that you find yourself running over and over again because it's one of your favorite drills?
Sure. So I actually think I mentioned this in our last discussion together as well, but it still holds true. And that would be one of our favorite transition games that we call 5-on-5 transition buildup. And this is a game that pretty much works on continuous advantage transition situations. So one team will have a two-on-one advantage on the way down the court, and then the opposite team will have a 3-on-2 advantage, and then a 4-on-3, 5-on-4, building up into a 5-on-5 setting. And that's a really great game to work on our missed break attack, where we're being our own outlet. We're throwing hit-ahead strikes. We're working on our dominoes game of taking advantage of that numerical advantage that we have and doing what we do, as running is a big part of our DNA. So that's a great transition game that I would highly recommend. I can go into more detail later if needed. It's kind of hard without a diagram. 2-on-1 dominoes is a great shooting game that we like to do that incorporates some live reads, where let's say we'll have a player at the corner and the lower wing. Both of those players are on offense, and we have a third player on the block with a basketball. They would throw a strike to one of the two players, does not matter. And then they would sprint at either player with their hands raised like a good, strong closeout. If the player with the ball gets sprinted at, they would go 2 out, make that extra pass for the shot. But if that defender sprinted at the girl without the ball, they would just shoot it. So you're kind of mixing in some shoot it or move it reads. You're blending in some 2 passes out of the paint, and you're kind of gamifying shooting drills, which can be challenging to do. There's a variety of small advantage to big advantage small-sided games that we'll do to work on our driving reads. That could be blind 2-on-2. That could be hip 4-on-4. Just working on turning a small advantage, which what we would describe as just having a defender on our hip, into a big advantage or a highly valued shot. And then lastly, I would have to throw in our Suns closeouts 3-on-3, which would be, I think also it's referred to as maybe Hurley closeouts, where you kind of got 3 players lined up on the baseline, 3 offensive players top, wing, top, and you're kind of dishing the ball around the horn as all of the baseline players are closing out diagonally. And then we're playing live after the full ball reversal. And that's one of our favorite defensive drills to work on. So those would just be 3 or 4 drills that we really like doing. Any advantage transition games or any advantage half court games really blends well with our system.
I think those are all great. I've ran 2 of those. The transition drill, which I refer to as free throw transition, and then the Hurley 3-on-3. And a funny story about the free throw transition or the 5-on-5 build up. I was looking for a transition drill this summer to plug into the practice plan, and that one came to mind. So I plugged it in and took it to practice, and we luckily had extra time. And so I was like, okay, we're going to run this free throw transition drill, and briefly explained it. And everybody looked at me like, what? And I was like, okay, this is common drill. You guys have never ran it before? And even the seniors were like, no, never ran it before. And we set it up, we walked through it. And, okay, does this jog your memory? Nope, never ran this one before. And so we got going on it. Once they got the hang of the drill and what we were looking for out of it, I really enjoyed that because you could see the learning and the enjoyment that they got from the drill. And apparently the first time that they ever ran it. So
yeah, that's one of those where, I mean, if you were limited to 1 game or drill as a coach in a practice, that would certainly be up there, just because all of the different things that allows you to work on, it's top notch.
Yes, I agree. So we're talking about practices, we're talking about drills, and you had alluded to this earlier. Are you practicing throughout the season all the possible skills, or are you picking things that you want to be really, really good at? Let me rephrase that another way. So your team is just not that good at boxing out, offensively or defensively. It's just not something that seems to be in anybody's repertoire. So do you practice that more, or do you look at what you are good at and spend more time on those things rather than trying to practice the skill that's just not a strong suit?
Sure. So we're certainly a program that focuses more on strengthening our strengths and finding 1 or 2 things to get better at as the season progresses. And for your example of rebounding, typically at our level, all of our players know how to box out and technique-wise. Obviously, those are things that we preliminarily start with of how we want to check, hit, and get. Talk about some of those technical teaching points. But if we ever see slippage in regards to rebounding, this would be more of a time for us to begin emphasizing rebounding more. This would be a time for us to begin using different scoring systems in our games to emphasize and reward rebounding. And that would typically come in the fashion of adding 1 or 2 points per game based on offensive rebounds. I'm a firm believer that the better offensive rebounding team that you are, the better defensive rebounding team that you will become. And when I was down in Superior, we had a first-team All-State post player that was just a beast on the boards, about 6'1", playing volleyball down at Ole Miss right now. And when she graduated, naturally, we were very worried about our rebounding because we had a lot of girls back, thankfully, but we were small without a 6'1" post at that level. And we never did one strictly defensive rebounding drill, but we overemphasized it really throughout the course of the entire year once that player graduated. And that next year, we actually increased our defensive rebounding percentage. And that was kind of evidence in my mind where, we all know that rebounding really is 80% dog, 20% technique. But that proved to me that if we can just emphasize something really, really hard and base our scoring systems around it, it might get better. And in regards to your question on, just skills in general, our program philosophy for skill development really is every player, every skill. And that's more geared towards the offensive side of things. But we really want to make sure that we're staying dedicated to the things that matter and become really good at what happens the most. So we're going to have guards that are working on their punch concept. And we're going to work on guards post footwork and post finishing. And we're also going to work on forwards perimeter moves, whether it's off the catch, dribble starts, you name it. Every player in our program is going to get taught every skill. And for us, that generally speaking is our footwork, our passing and catching, our shooting, our driving reads, our finishing at the rim, protection plans, decision-making, you name it. So that's certainly our philosophy is every player, every skill. And, what gets emphasized typically gets better, or what gets rewarded typically gets repeated. So I like that rebounding example because there's kind of a good experience that I had with that. But yeah, every player, every skill, because our skill development really is our offense and vice versa.
Perfectly put, Coach. I had another example in mind to touch on the point that I was wanting to make there, but you actually stole the words right from my mouth with your scoring of the rebounding. So perfectly put there. Kind of wrapping up here, is there anything that you wanted to touch on today? Any additional thoughts, final thoughts to wrap up here?
There is not. Like I said, I thought we had the opportunity to do a nice deep dive the other month of some offensive things. I like how this conversation was more geared towards just some general ideas. It allowed us to touch base on a lot of different topics. And I really enjoyed the AAU conversation as well.
I did as well. I think that's very beneficial to younger coaches or coaches who are looking to make some changes in their program. Great conversation. And I enjoyed our conversation a couple months back about your offensive style. If a coach wanted to check you out on social media, where could they find you at?
Sure. So I'm on X at @Coach Nannen. And I really utilize X more for just our high school program and just player promotion. Instagram, I don't use much. I did hop back on the TikTok trend recently. I believe my name is Coach Nannen at Coach Nannen Hoops or something like that. I'm just posting some drills, some practice ideas. Actually just posted our 5-on-5 transition buildup a few days ago. So definitely give me a follow on there.
As young coaches and really anybody in any kind of teaching, coaching, leadership capacity, players as well, networking, building out your network is very beneficial because you can always bounce ideas off of each other. You can disagree or agree, but at the end of the day, you're getting to know people and you're getting to share great thoughts and insights like we did today. So, Coach, with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you for your input. And as always, thank you for coaching.
Absolutely, man. Thanks again for having me. And like I said, happy to answer any messages on Twitter. We can talk driving space. We can talk practice drills, you name it. Love talking hoops. So thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to the next conversation.
Me as well.
Coaches, thank you for listening to the United Basketball Plus Coaching and Leadership Podcast. For all things United Basketball Plus, visit us at our website, www.unitedbasketballplus.com, or on X at UnitedBBallPlus.